Hello, everyone. This week for Tuesdays with Miss Tampa, I have a very special guest. I'm fangirling super hard right now. I have Miss America 2000, Heather French Henry, with me today. Thank you so much for being here.
It's certainly a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for being involved in the Miss America organization. I hope you've had a great experience so far. It sounds like you've got a lot of experience already under your belt.
Absolutely. It has definitely been a journey, but I am super excited to learn more about your journey. So today, can you start off by sharing a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're up to these days?
Well, that is a long book to write, certainly, but I'll give a sort of a brief version. So I am from Kentucky, for those of you who may not know out there, hailing from the Bluegrass State, and I'm from two little towns, Augusta and Maysville. And I say two towns because when I was on David Letterman after I won Miss America, he asked me where I was from. I said I have two hometowns, and so both towns claim me. I was born in a little town, Augusta, Kentucky, about 1,400 people. And my great-great-great-grandfather, about 7 generations ago, founded the town. And then we moved to the big metropolis of Maysville, Kentucky, right next door, about 9,000 people. And I say that all because I want people and young women to know out there who are competing that, most Miss Americas, and I would gander to say a lot of state title holders even, come from small communities. And the public out there at large sometimes thinks that we're all pretty sophisticated and we're born in cities and, we have a lot handed to us, but a lot of us are born in very small communities. We've had to work extremely hard to get to where we are today, no doubt. But I think that builds sort of a common bond to us. And I want to just give some hope for people from small communities that you just never know what your future holds coming from a small community. It took me half a decade of competing to win a state title to get to Miss America. But really, when I was 4 years old is when I had the first dream that I was Miss America. And so to me, that became an ultimate goal. I don't want to say I never once doubted, because later in life I had, some doubts of whether that path was going to continue. But early on in my childhood, I think what's important is that my parents taught me that all things are possible, that if you believe it and you work hard, you can achieve it. And I'll never forget, I was at a church homecoming hymn sing with my parents because I was raised singing Southern gospel music. And a little girl reached over to me and she said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be Miss America." And it's funny, I run into her every now and then when I go back home, and she always regales that story. And she was always amazed that I had such confidence about what I wanted to do. Now, of course, I didn't know what Miss America really meant. I watched it on television, and I saw the glitz and the glamour. And then it was probably when I watched Debbie Turner win, who became Miss America in 1990, that I really connected with her when she competed and when she won and when she just threw her hands up to God and gave thanks. And I thought, that's the type of woman I want to be. That's the type of Miss America I want to be. And so I've just always had this special connection with Debbie. And so I really just set forth my path. I competed in lots of county fair pageants. I think for a lot of us who grow up in the country, no matter if you continue on with pageantry or not, I think every junior high and high school girl competes in the Junior Miss County Fair or the Miss County Fair and goes on to the State County Fair. We didn't have a plethora of these, like the NAM pageants and like Universal Southern Charm. There were a few of those types of pageants out there, but not a whole lot, just more local festival and county fair pageants. So I enjoyed doing those. I actually lost more titles than I won. Certainly. So I know what it's like to be second runner-up and runner-up. There's no doubt. In fact, the very first crown that I ever won was actually, well, I didn't actually win it. I bought it at a rummage sale for $3 when I was little. Yeah. And so I did all these like little Mr. and Miss pageants. I never could win one. So I found one at a yard sale and I bought it. But when I was in junior Miss pageants is when I started to be a bit more successful. We didn't have a lot of money. I didn't spend a lot of money on dresses. We were yard sale thrifty people. I always say, why buy when you can bum? Certainly. And I didn't have, coaches weren't plentiful then, certainly. And I'm not sure even if they were, we would have been able to afford it. So I just learned to be observant. I think that I'm a very resourceful person. That's something as a designer I certainly know about myself. And my mother too, gifted seamstress. We're all artistic and musically inclined in my family. So we're able to be pretty resourceful with what we've got around us. And so when I first started doing Junior Miss, I had like a T-length kind of cute dress on. And then we started seeing that more of the winners had long gowns on. So we started looking for something. I'll never forget my mother calling me from a yard sale saying, I'm going to come up and get you. I've got this bridesmaid's dress. Yeah, that's going to be perfect. We can remake it. And so she came and got me, went down. We tried it on this lady's house. And it was a bridesmaid's dress, but my mom did wonders for it. And it was just, learning the ropes, and not that the clothes makes the person, but the whole presentation, feeling like you've got your total you package, not someone else's perception, but the total you package together. And then I started to be a bit more successful, certainly, and held many local titles as far as county fairs go. Did not start competing for Miss America until I got to college. So I went to University of Cincinnati, which is in Ohio, about an hour and 15 minutes away from Maysville, but it put me in another state. I did not compete until my sophomore year, the summer after my sophomore year of college. So by this time I was probably 19. I got in college at 17, a little early, but I actually competed in Miss Ohio first because I couldn't connect with anybody from Miss Kentucky. And in those days, that was pre-email, pre-cell phone. And so no one had returned my message. And so I competed for Miss Pickerington at Miss Ohio, went to Miss Ohio, got top 10. And I really didn't even know that people watched other state pageants at that point, even to see the winners. And so someone found out that I was a Kentucky girl competing in Ohio, and they called me and said, hey, you're a Kentucky girl. You should be competing in Kentucky. And so the very next year, I went and won Miss Lexington, which is a very large preliminary here in Kentucky. And then went on to win Miss J-Town, Miss Jeffersontown, whole thing. We didn't have sashes then, so that would have been a pretty long title to have. And then Miss Heart of the Thoroughbred. That's my favorite right there. Miss Heart of the Thoroughbred. Nice title. But no less, I had a great director. And then was Miss Louisville. And that's the year that I won Miss Kentucky to get to Miss America. So it took me half a decade, a lot of learning, certainly. And I had a lot of great advice. I also want to let people know out there that I had a lot of obstacles too. I mean, at some point in your journey, whatever that journey may be, whether it's Miss America, whether it's something else, you're going to have people who will champion you. But you may also have people who, and even well-intentioned people, who will try to convince you that that's not your path. I had a lot of really good friends that sat down with me and said, Heather, there are easier ways to get scholarship money.
Sure.
Certainly. And so I just want to let people know that sometimes on the path that you're on, you may not have all the cheerleaders that you want. You may have more naysayers than you have cheerleaders. But if it's your path, you stay on that path. Be confident in yourself. And I knew, the year before my final year, which would have been, I would have aged out. I called my mother and I said, I just don't think I can do this anymore. I was a graduate student. I was an art director at the Environmental Protection Agency. I was also teaching fashion illustration as a graduate student at University of Cincinnati. And she, of course, was pretty wise. And she said, just put that on a shelf and just wait a while. And so it was getting to be, spring was coming around the corner, which meant that the preliminaries were starting to wrap up. And my father got really sick. He went to the hospital, went into a coma for a month. But the last thing he said before he went into a coma was, I want you to try one more time. Our veterans need a Miss America. And so that really just, it changed the total focus of why I was competing, that it really wasn't just about me and something that I enjoyed doing. It wasn't just about the scholarship, but it was also about, the platform and what that could do. I didn't have that as my platform all the years I competed because I was just afraid to tell our family story about what we had been through. But that was sort of his okay. It's okay for you to take on that story. It's okay for you to share our tragedies and our triumphs, what we've been through. It's no longer embarrassing. It still was pretty hard in the beginning, and now, we talk about everything, certainly, and social media gives us that ability. But he did come out of the coma a month later. My father is Mr. America. I know there are other Mr. America fathers, but my father is Mr. America. But he really gave me that extra oomph to go out there and fight to become the Miss Kentucky and Miss America I wanted to be. It also gave me the confidence that I really didn't need the title in order to do something, because it just really opened up my path and my mission for my life. And so when I went on stage, I won Miss Louisville, and then I went on stage at Miss America. I'll never forget standing in evening wear and literally looking at the judges and saying to myself, of course not out loud, I really don't care. I hope you like me, but I really don't care if you don't, because after this year, I'm going to go on and continue to do great things. I don't need a title. And in fact, one of the judges said when I walked out of interview, he said, you walked out, and I looked at the other judges and said, she really doesn't need this to be a successful young woman, but with this crown, she can do some pretty amazing things. And so I thought that was really interesting that I had finally just come into my own. And then at Miss America, I prepared as much as I could. And I wanted to have fun. You only get one shot, right, at the big crown. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a great time. I wanted to make sure I prepared so I could never look back and say, shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I'd have worked a little harder, if I'd have done a little more of that. And so I really took the month and a half between Miss Kentucky and Miss America. Nothing disturbed my path. I did appearances, I trained, I did vocal lessons. I was on it. And in those days, I don't know about other states, but, I had to live with the executive director. So it was focused every day from the time I got up to the time I went to bed, certainly. But by the time I got to Miss America, I felt very comfortable in who I was. I never once had that feeling that I was going to win. I just felt very confident in how I prepared. And so finally, on the final night, when it went from top 10, I was the 9th call for top 10, and then I was the 4th call for top 5. We went backstage during commercial break, and I'll never forget just saying a prayer, Lord, I want to be content with what I'm given. Thank you for getting me this far. If this isn't the opportunity that you've laid out for me, I pray for whoever it is. And I just want you to know, thank you for getting me this far. And so, of course, I did get the crown. I walked the runway, and the rest is sort of history. But, that in a nutshell is a bit about the pre-life leading up to the crown. And I'm sure you have more questions about the crown and afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. That advice is incredible, and it really hits home for me because I know how easy it can be, especially in this pageant world, that you're trying to please people or you're trying to impress the judges, whatever it may be. But really, this organization is about that self-growth and the journey that you experience. So I experienced that even just through 1 year in the Miss America organization, but it's really life-changing. And so more about your year as Miss America. What did you gain from traveling as Miss America? What are some of the highlights?
Oh, wow. So I had a phenomenal year. Being the Millennium Miss America, and you can see behind me, I put my crown out so you guys could see because it's the special crown gold with rubies in it. Being the Millennium Miss America was the perfect time to have a patriotic platform or social impact initiative, as you young ladies call it today. That it was perfect because you had Saving Private Ryan that just came out. Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and I and several others worked on the World War II Memorial Foundation together that year. That was a huge push. And so it just seemed that the red, white, and blue, it was perfect. To have homeless veterans as a platform, at the beginning of the year, the Miss America organization was a little concerned that might be too much of a niche because they didn't understand the dynamic of homeless veterans initiatives. But I did because my dad had suffered from PTSD and substance abuse. His brother, a Vietnam veteran, had become homeless. So I knew that there were lots of veterans and their families who were facing these issues. And I also knew there were resources that a lot of veterans didn't know about. And so I actually had to do a lot of bridge building for the Miss America organization to the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, and then in that turn then led to partnerships with the White House. And so I became a very Washington, D.C. oriented Miss America when it came to doing legislative policy. I'll never forget Veterans Day, a few months after I won. I actually was in sort of a bunker hold room with the president, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and myself, just the four of us for an hour. I will never forget being there going, what am I doing here? Wow. I mean, it was just that wow moment, that sort of epiphany of, I think I have arrived at where I'm supposed to be. And they spent the hour asking me about my platform, what I wanted to do. And then when we got on stage at Arlington in that sort of rotunda amphitheater area, the President of the United States actually called me out in his speech and had me stand. And it was really awesome because my parents were there. My younger brother was there. It just was really neat to be, it was that sort of edification that you need from time to time that, hey, you're on the right path. And so during that year, we visited VA hospitals, homeless veteran facilities. I really championed not wearing the crown a whole lot. Of course, in my day, it really wasn't a thing. Nicole Johnson, who was a phenomenal Miss America, had diabetes as her platform, still works on that today. She and I share that affinity for sort of a life's mission, utilizing our platform. She didn't wear a crown. And so when I was going to homeless veteran events and VA hospitals, it just wasn't appropriate. When I was testifying in front of Congress, it just wasn't appropriate to wear the crown, because sometimes, as you all know, and we hate to say it, when you have the crown on, people lose all sense of reality about what you're about. They like focus on that. And you know what? Sometimes that's really great. In a parade, you go to schools, love that. I love using mine. I tried my crown on lots of people. In fact, during my year, I broke a lot of barriers. So I didn't wear the crown a whole lot. I tried it on the heads of people who were over 13. I was told beginning of my year that you weren't allowed to place the crown on a head of anyone over 13. I had to fight that because I said, well, my target audience for my platform are going to be a little older than 13. And I'll never forget being in Miami at the VA hospital. And at that time, we had some World War I veterans left, which there are obviously no one left today. But there was a little veteran named Martin. He was like 103. And he wanted to try the crown on. And I looked at my traveling companion. I said, see, I said, you know, my target audience is not 13 years old. I appreciate when I do get to see young people, but my target audience are men and women who fought for our country, and many are going to be older. And so we sort of broke that barrier. I also broke the barrier of being able to wear jeans to appearances. Well, it was important because when you go to a homeless veteran stand down, the last thing you need to do is arrive in a limo and in a gown. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Because you want to be approachable, you want to be accessible. And so I would arrive in a DAV, a Disabled American Veterans Transport van, which was awesome. And then I would also have jeans on and a t-shirt, ready to work. I never really just wanted to go in and just speak and grip and grin. And that's important when that's what you need to do, and that's all that you can do. But at these homeless veteran standouts, I wanted to serve food. I just wanted to be a part of making a difference instead of just being there being a pretty girl. And in fact, one of my favorite photos is of me at the Kansas City stand down, and I was handing out blankets to homeless veterans. And this one gentleman reached over, I handed him a blanket. He was a Vietnam veteran, and he kissed me on the forehead. And that was the above the fold picture on the newspaper the next day. And it really spoke volumes to me. So I did tons of work. Just like, well, I feel bad for Camille this year because she's not able to really travel. But in our day, it was true. Every 18 to 24 hours, you were in a different city. You were traveling everywhere. It was always a one-way ticket to somewhere else. Again, appearances from homeless shelters all the way to, I performed at Carnegie Hall and Kennedy Center, and I was in Hollywood and did those events. I did the D-Day Museum opening, which is now the World War II Museum, and I was there with Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. And listen, when I go back through my year, of which I can remember almost every single detail, it really wasn't until I got married and had children that I just can't remember what I had for breakfast. But that Miss America year was phenomenal. I mean, I did have my obstacles. I went through, I think we had 3 different CEOs that year. We started out the year with a little controversy about contractual changes. That CEO left, an interim CEO came in. Halfway through my year, I got another CEO. But one thing that you find out when you're on the road, and I think a lot of us share this, is that what goes on the road is really not reflective of what goes on in the head office. And I certainly appreciate all that they do. And I know we've been through our own ups and downs over the years, but we've each had our set of challenges, certainly. But I think once you finish your year, and the further away from it you get, and the more of life that you experience, being a mom, being a spouse, having a life and a career, you look back on that year and you go, wow, that was a pretty special moment, regardless of all of the stuff that you have to handle, because it's just, you only get like a split second to adapt to that situation. And I was actually older. I was one of the oldest, I think, that competed that year. So I was 24. I experienced traveling the world and having the start of a career, but it really, by the time you get used to that year, it's over.
Right.
Right. And then you kind of go, oh, okay, I should have actually already been thinking about things even before I won. But it's a very interesting dynamic. It changed my life, put me on a path that, takes you in a different hemisphere. Certainly, even then, my sisters who are state title holders and local title holders, there are opportunities that you're given that you would not have been given. 20 years later, I still get opportunities because of Miss America. In fact, here in Kentucky, because I'm the only Miss Kentucky to have won Miss America, and I think Katie Sam can probably share this affinity for Indiana, maybe Katie Harmon for Oregon, that wherever you go in your state, especially once you've moved back there, Miss America becomes your name. Like, I'll be in Walgreens and people know me, certainly, but the first thing out of their mouth is always, hey, Miss America. And so 20 years later, you understand that no matter where you go in life, no matter what you do, that's really the one thing people are going to identify you with. And it also means that you have that responsibility for the reflection of the entire organization. What people think about me is what people are going to think about you, because the likelihood that they're going to meet a lot of us is not very high. So when they meet me, I have to think all the time, well, I want to be the best reflection of the organization that I can. I don't want any Miss America before me or after me, or any contestant who's gone before me or after me ever to be looked down upon because I did not do my job being a great reflection for this organization, no matter what shape the organization is in. It's part of my legacy. My husband reminds me all the time when I get frustrated. He said, "This is your legacy." I said, okay. So that's a little about my year. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Well, it sounds like your year was and you did it all. You said this was a dream of yours since you were 4 years old. I had a very similar path. That was my dream since I was 4. What did it feel like when they put that crown on your head? Your name was called out as Miss America of the century. What was that?
I will say it was a bizarre sort of moment, and you don't really get a lot of time to revel in it because you have like 2.5 seconds, right? They're throwing the crown on your head and thrusting you down the runway, and I had confetti going everywhere. And I'll never forget, one of the stage managers, Ken, was at the end of the runway, and all I could see was his white glove. He was like, "Stop!" And you can see on my face, I go, "Ah!" And so I had to turn around and go back. It was in my day, and they change it from year to year, which is kind of confusing. So in my day, they announced the runner-up first. And so I didn't actually hear my name get announced. I just knew that they announced Jade's name first, who is a phenomenal woman in and of herself, so accomplished, and actually is running for president, if you don't know that, like on an independent platform. But phenomenal young woman. And so they called her name, and I was sort of the last one left standing. And what was really awesome is Donnie and Marie Osmond, who I just grew up loving. I actually had the Donnie and Marie dolls. And Donnie Osmond was actually like my first rock concert. I don't know if you call him rock, but popular music concert. And so Marie actually was the first woman, and maybe I don't know if she still is, the only woman in Miss America history. We'll have to look that up for all of our Miss America buffs out there. But I know she was the first ever woman in history to actually announce who was Miss America. She did that final announcement. So she called Jade Smalls, and she actually, when I went back and watched the tape, I got to hear her say, Miss America 2000, Heather Renee French is Miss America 2000. So that was a pretty awesome moment. And then they actually emceed the very next year as well. So I got a chance to work with them. They had their show out, the Donnie and Marie show on television. And she did like a Miss America baby doll, Miss America 2000 baby doll. So I've got that. So yeah, it was pretty awesome, I must say. But having that dream and seeing it come to fruition, the first thing I really thought, of course, there's a scripture, to whom much is given, much is required. I knew immediately when the crown went on my head that I had a lot of work to do. And I don't know that I was overwhelmed, but I was really, wow, this is the start of something big. So enjoy this for a hot second, and then you're going to move on into real work. And then I'll never forget thinking as I was walking the runway about people at home. Kentucky is one of the most beautiful states in all of the United States. And I was been very blessed to be born here. There are a lot of misperceptions about what Kentucky is, who Kentucky is, what we represent, who we are. And, I've grown up with those stereotypes, certainly. And so I was really hoping that I made people back home proud, because we celebrate our own. I mean, if you've ever seen us during basketball season, of which we didn't get to have, we are fanatics about anything Kentucky. When people in Kentucky do great things, we love our Kentucky people. And so I just really, I was hoping that people back home were watching. And of course, I heard lots of stories about bonfires and, things like that happened, and celebrations. That was really neat.
That's awesome and so inspiring. Now, going a little bit past the crown, you recently ran for an elected position in Kentucky. My social impact is focused on inspiring more women to pursue leadership positions and focus in the political as well. So can you share what ignited your spark to run for office, and were there any obstacles along the way?
Well, I've been in and out of government for the past 20 years. In fact, of course, as Miss America, a large part of my work and my impact was in government. I didn't grow up wanting to be in government. In fact, no one in my family had ever run for office or probably even donated to a campaign. So the idea of running for office was really scary for a long time, and a lot of people have asked me to do it. My husband was a sitting lieutenant governor when we started dating and when we got married. So I experienced public life with him, being a spouse. He ran for governor, so I experienced that on the spouse end of it as well. So I knew how really kind of dirty and ugly that it was, and how hard it was, unnecessarily so. I will tell you that. I hope it changes for the future. And then a few years after that, I was asked to become the commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs. So I served in a leadership position, but in an appointed position. That to me was the ultimate job. That or Secretary of Veterans Affairs. I mean, let's be honest, that is, an area that I absolutely love. I eat, sleep, and dream everything that surrounds our military and our veterans, whether I'm in a leadership position or not. It's just what I kind of think about every single day. But to be able to take on that department, which was, by the time I left, 910 employees, $102 million annual budget, 4 state veterans nursing homes, 5 state veteran cemeteries, 120 counties. Kentucky, as small as we are, we have 120 counties. So 120 counties worth of employees and services. And so to me, that was really the ultimate job. And I actually even survived the switch of administration as deputy commissioner, which was still in a leadership position there. But I felt the need and the calling to do even more. And a lot of people don't know how agencies really interconnect in state government. And state governments, I will say, probably get a bad rap as well. But there's a lot of great employees in all state governments. They go to work every day. They make things function. They last through different administrations, whether it be Republican, Democrat, Independent. They really are the people that get the job done. And so I just felt that the Secretary of State's job was something I had a lot of experience with through our interaction and interagency cooperations with overseas military voting, through businesses, because most Secretary of States, not all, because it varies state by state, actually do the same types of jobs. Of voting is what most people know the Secretary of States as. Here in Kentucky, it is a huge job, but that's not the majority of the staff and the majority of the responsibility. The majority of the responsibility and staff and finances that come in are through the business portal, because you have to register your business. It's where businesses start. And I really wanted, as a businesswoman, I wanted to really influence that. And I had some experience also working with veteran-owned businesses through that department or that agency as well. They also happen to handle all of the historic archives for the historic land grants that actually make up our state. And my husband and I are big history buffs. And so we handle a lot of historic archives for the Rosemary Clooney Museum, including the White Christmas collection from the White Christmas movie, which is awesome. And we travel that exhibit and host that at the Rosemary Clooney Museum in Augusta, Kentucky. So, you know, those historic archives were very important to me as well. And I had wanted to do a lot with that. Unfortunately, I did not win that race. And I will say, you know, there are moments that we all go through that we're not going to win. And when I gave my concession speech, you know, I really focused a little bit on that, you know, there are going to be moments where we're not at the top of the list. We are not going to be the last one standing on stage, you know, with the crown on our head. But, you know, we rise up tomorrow and we continue to go. That doesn't make or break us, right? And there was a lot I experienced in there. I did experience, unfortunately, a lot of gender inequality during that race. I was pretty shocked about how I was represented by the press, even friends in the media who didn't mean to be demeaning, but instead of reading down through all of my academic accolades and my work the last 20 years, I was basically introduced as the wife of a former lieutenant governor and a former Miss America, as if that's all that I had done. And you know, and other people, they would read down their entire, you know, list of accolades and work history, and some of it wasn't even real work history, it was internships. But you know, that's fine, but treat us as equal. You know, don't overshadow me by something you seem as just, you know, this title. And so I had a real problem with that. And by the time the campaign was ending, you know, I finally sort of got the guts to speak out against that on some radio interviews after some of my colleagues would introduce me. I'm like, you can't introduce me that way. That's all the work that I've done. They're like, no, you've done a lot of work. I'm like, well, then introduce me as if you acknowledge all the work that I have done. Because, and I want people to know this, with that title of Miss America and whatever title that you have, you know, there can be a lot of blessings, but it's going to also create some obstacles for you, because people will have misperception about who you are and what you've done with that. I still get it today. 20 years later, I still only get identified. People will say, well, you know, all you've done is wear a crown. Oh, really? You know, if you even Google me, you will find out that that's not true. But people have a very limited palette sometimes about what they want to absorb, what they want to believe. And so I think for most of us, Debbie Turner told me one day, and we were talking about this very thing, and she said it was just a few months into her tour as Miss America that she realized that this title will outlive her. And it is true. I'm going to be 99 years old, and I could be president of the United States, and somebody would say, oh, she's a former Miss America. And you know what? And sometimes they mean it in a good way, and sometimes they don't mean it in a good way. And so you have to learn to kind of take that. And I will say, hindsight, looking back at that race, because it was a new path for me, I felt like I wasn't vocal maybe enough about my beliefs. And I was told that I needed to be nice. And I think that that's something that's very unfair for women, that they feel like we always have to smile and be nice, because if we're not nice and smile, then we're, I don't want to use an ugly word certainly on here, but we're outspoken, or we're bossy, you know, or, you know, another word. And I think that that's unfortunate, because it's hard when you're a female in a leadership position in male dominated areas. I've never really wore that as a chip on my shoulder. I've been working with military veterans, which are predominantly, you know, male, even though we have a growing number of female veterans. but they're not the high representation, certainly. But I've never gone in with that chip on my shoulder. But during that campaign, I will tell you, it's taught me that, I need to take more authority about having my voice and my opinion, and that, your perception of being nice, doesn't have to mean I have to dumb down or mute who I am in the face of being bold. And that's one thing I definitely learned during the campaign. I also learned, unfortunately, that campaigns really don't show an aptitude for your ability to do the job. I'd already shown that I could lead a state department, one that was much larger than what I was actually running for. So in politics, so if you're thinking about it, you really have to, do your homework, because when you feel like you've got the qualifications to be that role, to serve that role, I had shown I could do, different administrations. I'm really not a politically motivated person. Certainly, I'm there to do a job, and especially one that's what we call a ministerial job, one that whose job responsibilities are identified by the legislature. And you go in, you do your job, regardless of what political affiliation people are. And I had already shown that I was a great worker, had great experience, a lot of great references, certainly, but that's not what political races really are about. And that, to me, is probably the most challenging when we talk about future leadership in our country. It is very much so right now about money and who's popular and social media. And I think we've gotten really away from, hey, let's really target people who are, qualified. Not to say that other people who are in all these races aren't qualified, but when you think about the qualifications that you have, it's sometimes hard to translate those in the current environment that we have, certainly. I also realize that at the end of the race, that sometimes we have to realize the hardships that we go through this may not have been a race that was supposed to be mine anyway. But I know that after my concession speech, I got emails and texts from all over the country of people saying, I was so disheartened you lost, but your concession speech just gave me so much hope. And so I have to think, well, maybe that was the whole point. Maybe people needed to see someone like me actually lose. I mean, there's a really important part of life where sometimes when you watch people who are your mentors or who are kind of up there maybe, and I'm not saying I've ever put myself on a pedestal, believe me, but other people have. And when they see you either fall or not get that achievement, or they see you lose, but you choose to rise up anyway, and you choose to get up, it can provide a lot of hope for people to go, wow, you know what? She didn't let that destroy her. And there were quite a few emails that gave me the belief that, okay, God, maybe me being in that race really wasn't about me, but it was about showing other people. So, I'm still kind of dealing a little bit with all that, but right after the race, or after the election, I had one day off, and then 2 days later, after the election, we were putting in the White Christmas exhibit in a museum here in Kentucky, because it travels during the holiday season. So, I was right on to something else. If there's one thing about me, I'm never involved in just one thing. I've got a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes it's hard to keep everything juggling in the air, certainly. So, but that was my experience in the race. Will I do it again? I'm not sure. I don't know that I really enjoyed it. I really thought that I might, because obviously the grip and grin, being in public service, is something I've done for 20 years. My husband and others who have always been sort of politically affiliated, he grew up in a former senator and governor's sort of household, as friends, and they were his mentor, and he really loved that. He was lieutenant governor. They loved the campaign. I really did not enjoy it. I like having a mission. I like being out in people, but I don't like raising money for politics. I think about all the billions of dollars that get wasted in campaigns. I hate to say wasted, but it drives me crazy when there's so much need out there, and yet we spend millions of dollars on a political campaign. I hate asking people for money on something that's not tax deductible, especially, right? Like, oh my gosh, why are people writing checks for this? I appreciated it so much because people did, down to a grocer, a bagger at Kroger. Every time I'd go in, I'd notice online he would contribute like $10 or $50. And that to me means so much because he probably didn't really have it to give, but he believed in me, and I appreciate that. All the people who gave, certainly. It's just, it was very awkward, I think, for me. I think it is for a lot of people who run, but there are some people who really know how to do it. They'll stay on the phone like 20 hours a day, just calling, hey, give me money. And they don't get their feelings hurt when people slam the phone down. I am a little too sensitive, maybe, I think, for all that, but I enjoy serving. I would like to serve in other capacities, probably other than maybe elected officials. I will say, I think Erica Harold might, my Miss America sister, she's always said she wants to be president. I said, you get to be president, I want to be in your cabinet.
Well, I want to thank you for simply running as a female for an elected office. You're changing the narrative, and it is really, really important to talk about the difficulties and things you experience. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But going on to current day, the world unfortunately is facing a lot of, hate and really horrible things. A lot of people are hurting. If there was a message that you could send to America right now, what is it? What do we need to do to come together?
Well, I've always used the hashtag, when I've used it more so lately, especially for all of my friends, unity consciousness. I think as even in a leadership position, I was always conscious of diversity within our workforce, in our situations, not really just picking people because of, but allowing more people access who may not feel like they have the access, because sometimes people just don't feel like, they even have their own bondage too. And making sure that you are saying, hey, we're open. You are absolutely qualified to fill this position or to apply for this position, and making sure that people realize who you are and that you are open to equality and to love. And forever I've used the hashtag, kindness matters. And I think that that's really important because I've experienced in my life a lot of hate as well, not to the degree of discrimination that some of my other friends have certainly had because of their skin color, but, for socially economic issues, when you're the poor family in the small neighborhood, you're the bottom of the totem pole, and sometimes you don't get the things because you're not the influential family. And even politically, when you talk, if you're, one side of the aisle or the other, just in your registration, people automatically turn their voice off or their ears off to you. And of course, as a female, I've certainly experienced that type of discrimination. And it's very hard. And I've always said, if we could all just be a little kinder, be a little more open, then the world would be a much better place. It may not solve all the problems, certainly, but what we're seeing today is the lack of willingness for people to have open discussions and to be kind to one another. I've always said, if we're going to really heal a lot, not just racial issues, but across the board to heal a lot of open wounds, we have to learn to converse. And I would really love to see some leaders in moderation out there. And there are experts who know how to create these conversations. I would love to see what their take is on all that we're going through right now, because, what I see and observe, I've always tried to I don't want to say stand back because that makes it seem like an uninvolved situation. But when you're in a leadership position, especially when you stand back and you watch the dynamics go on and you see the blaming and you see the harshness. And, I've watched a lot of comments on social media from the side, which are extremely eye-opening to what people are willing to say about each other and to each other. Of course, they feel like there's that safety net, right? That anonymity, which there's really not anonymity, but they think there is, certainly. And I want that conversation to come together. I watched an excellent documentary the other day, and it's seemingly unrelated, but it kind of is related. So Jane Goodall, who is like this, world famous researcher and scientist, phenomenal story. But she got a lot of hate in her lifetime because she partnered with oil companies and gas companies who were, in the essence, seemingly destroying the very animals and the forest that she was trying to protect. But she was very heartfelt in her desire to get to understand and get them to understand her. And it's only really through having that conversation that we can really move forward. And I really appreciate it, because it's a very dangerous situation for someone to be in, to be willing to stop and to bring what is seemingly that exact opposite side, which can often seem like a volatile side, to the table and just say, how can we move forward together? Not that I have to agree with you, not that I have to really understand, but I need to hear what you believe so that we can come to sort of a come to Jesus moment, I guess I would say. I don't have all the answers, and I've had many conversations with my daughters. I've reached out to friends. I certainly sympathize with everything that people are going through right now. It's a hard time in our country. Not only have we gone through this whole coronavirus, and we're still going through it. Steve, my husband's a physician, and he's very concerned that we've just sort of seemingly put that aside, and now we're into a different phase of this, which I don't want to call it a phase because it's more than that. Racism is something that's been going on for generations. Certainly, I really have hopes that my daughter's generation and younger generations will grow up differently and having different thoughts and about what unity means, certainly, because we are still harboring a lot of what has happened, certainly, and I want to see us certainly move forward. So I'm hoping that my daughter's generation will be and produce something different. Your generation will produce something a bit more holistic and comprehensive, certainly for everyone. But as a parent, and I've even asked a lot of my friends, what should I be doing? I love you. I've always celebrated our commonalities, but our differences. What would you have me do? And a lot of my friends of color have said, talk to your daughters, and they know my daughters. Most of course, my Miss America sisters, we call them aunties, right? We become godmothers and aunts to all of our each other's children, and they said, talk to your children, make sure that they're aware, make sure that they're being raised seeing a unified people, and not seeing one race above the other. I mean, I think about what God would really want for us all, and I have to think that he's looking down and kind of shaking his head going, you're all my children.
Well, speaking of moving forward, the last thing I wanted to ask you is that the Miss America organization is embarking upon its 100th anniversary. What does this anniversary mean to you? And is Miss America still relevant? Why should people continue supporting Miss America?
So 100 years, right? I mean, I've served with veteran service organizations that are also sort of in their centennial celebration. And I just got done with the World War I Centennial Commission a few years ago. 100 years is a lot of history, right? We've gone through so much as a country and as a society that for anything to survive 100 years is pretty phenomenal. And I tell people all the time, everybody through 100 years is going to go through their own vicissitudes, their own ups and downs. And we are going to have to show flexibility and to be able to adapt. And sometimes you try to be flexible too much and try to adapt too much. And I think right now, especially during that Me Too movement and what we were going through and trying to transition into something, maybe we pushed it too far, and maybe in some areas we didn't push far enough. But it's always hard when you have something very a traditionally based organization that has stood sort of the test of time over 100 years, but we find ourselves in a place that maybe was a little like the 70s when they were doing the bra burnings and things like that on the boardwalk. But this movement of Me Too took it to a different level and really made us kind of step back and go, wow, who are we? How do we relate? I don't like the word relevant because I think that in everything that exists is relevant to something, certainly. but how you project the leadership, how you project your voice, really putting out there. I always say to people, this organization, we've always given the perception this is for all women. Not all women want to be Miss America, right? I mean, that's the truth. But it's about the spirit of the dream of something larger that I tell people, my path doesn't have to be your path, but we need to learn to celebrate each other's path, especially as women. And so in this time, how do we, one, educate people about the path that we're on? Because let me tell you, every Miss America under the sun has talked about scholarship, 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 and people, it's just not what they hear. And so what is people's perception of who we are, and how can we realistically go about building on top of what they hear? And so I do think branding wise, we're still in a flux about how we project our mission to people. So that's been a little weird, I think, for me, because in the time that I was Miss America, Miss Americas were seen as national experts in their platform. I mean, we were on all the national news stations. I mean, Nicole and Kate and others can attest to this as well. We were in the trenches, and we were seen as being in the trenches. It's just the world has changed drastically in the last 20 years. You even think about social media and the impact that has certainly had, and what does that mean? And I do find it interesting, and I don't mean to digress too much, but when we were talking about, and we did eliminate the swimsuit, which, for those of us who are traditional Miss America, I could live with it. I can live without it. I won swimsuit. It didn't make or break me. I was very proud of myself. I had worked really hard. I had always struggled with weight my whole life. So it was very encouragement sort of moment for me, but it wasn't all of what I was. But I was surprised at the dilemma that sort of created, certainly. I was also surprised that there were young women, and I look at my daughter's Instagram feeds, you can go 3 photos down, and all of these younger generations, you love posting about your bodies. It's totally different. I kind of like throw my hands up and go, wow, other than being Miss America Bikini, I am not posting a full picture of myself but women in your all younger generations, you're proud, you don't care. I mean, it is, you put it out there. And so I think we have maybe to rethink that as well, that maybe what we as older, Miss Americas or participants in the program, we may view something quite differently than what you view it as. Mm-hmm. And so I think, again, there's within our organization, a lot of conversation has to be had about what does that perception look like from one generation to the next, and how we carry that forward. Our organizations like Miss America, Miss USA, Miss Universe, relevant, certainly. I think that there's always going to be the need to have a female mentor out there, or someone other than government leadership and other than pure Hollywood leadership, but somebody that kind of bridges the gap for both, an ambassador sort of role, which is what I always see national and international title holders as. Someone out there doing goodwill. We don't have royalty here in America. We don't have, the ability to have a Princess Diana, certainly. And I'm not saying that any of us are, because she was so awesome, but that's sort of our version, right? It's that person that wins this title, that goes out and does good for the community and continues to serve. It shows young people and people alike a life of servitude, a life of mission, but it can also be a little glamorous, so yeah, I certainly think there's a place for it. We're just in a very difficult position right now. And I do want to give a shout out to all the volunteers. I think over the years, especially the past few years, a lot of volunteers have felt that their voice didn't count. I would not be the person I am today without all of those wonderful volunteers. During my day, we had about 300,000 volunteers across the country who were part of the organization. And I think about all of those ladies in the dressing room and all the stage crews. It's no joke. And all of these people who spend their time and effort on behalf of the dreams of young women like mine, man, props to you. You are what makes Miss America Miss America.
Mhm. Well, I cannot thank you enough for sitting down with me today. I want to share that whenever someone asks me what I think of a Miss America should be or the qualities, I always return to mentioning your name because
Aw.
it's always been so inspiring to me and show that it is more than just the crown and sash and that it is a life of service if you are really in it. And I just am so inspired by all of the work you do. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, and I wish you much luck on your journey and the growth. And just want to give a shout out to all those young ladies out there. Whether you win the crown or not, it is about the journey of growth, as you mentioned, and becoming the young woman that you want to be. And some win the crown, some don't, but that doesn't define you. You will be great.
Such incredible inspiration and advice. And again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care.